Salam to everybody else who's just joined, and welcome to MCB's Eco-Iftar webinar. We've hosted a few webinars. We've done 3 in the past few weeks now with different speakers, and this is the last of the series, but don't worry, this is also the best of the series. We're going to be joined, we are joined by Jumana and Anissa from the Green Deen tribe. But before we get into that, let me just pass over to Lamis to just go over some of the housekeeping and introduce an introduction to MCB and the work that MCB does.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm sure you're sick of seeing my face by now. Every week on this iftar, I introduce the MCB and do the housekeeping for you. But housekeeping first, I would say that, as I've mentioned in the chat, the call is recorded, and what we do is we share it afterwards on YouTube so that more people can benefit from it. And actually, week on week, we've had really good engagement. I think the Willowbrook one, you know, was probably where Dr. Lutfi spoke, was probably the most well engaged on. I had over 100 people, you know, watching it, and we had a lot of people on the call as well, alhamdulillah. So that was brilliant. So just be aware of that. We also do take feedback from the chat box. So if you share your opinions, share any questions you might have, share any feedback you might have for the MCB, we do take note of that. And the team is sort of taking that information and looking at how we can maybe improve our sustainability page on our website and share more resources and more projects in future, inshallah, as well. So there's that. Please, again, if you have questions, you can share them in the chat box, but you could also raise your hand, not visibly like this, as Montessori has been known to do, but you're never living that down. But if you click on your name in Zoom, you can raise your hand as a Zoom function, and it allows us as administrators to then come to you as we go on. So we'll sort of move between the people who raise their hands, and hopefully you can speak on camera or just audio. It's up to you, and then also the questions in the chat box. So that's general admin. Other than that, we keep you all on mute essentially whilst the speakers are talking, just to cut down on the background noise if we can. Other than that, to introduce myself more so, I think there's somebody who needs to be on mute right now. So, 1 second. Sorry. Thank you so much. Trying to multitask. Yes. So, as these guys have said, my name is Lamis. I work with the MCB as the operations manager, and I've been working with this wonderful team of volunteers, which is Shahab, Monteser, Bernardo, Manuel, and recently Hanan as well has joined the team. And we have been trying to really push towards doing more work with the MCB on green issues, sustainability issues, and ethical issues. So we very much feel as a team that Muslims should be taking the lead on this subject area, and we very much felt as the MCB that this is an area that needed to be worked on and take priority. I think we were all very aware of, you know, the current climate, and the MCB, as the largest Muslim umbrella body in the UK, you know, we have over 500 members who work on a range of issues, advocating and representing on behalf of our members, and those include, you know, women in mosques, the Black Muslim community, Islamophobia in the media and in political parties, working with our mosques and our youth. So all of these issues were being covered. And last year we were able to then run this campaign with mosques and really highlight the work that they were doing around becoming plastic free. And it's where some of the talks that have been happening in the background managed to gain a bit more momentum. And so that was the initial sort of push, being able to highlight these several mosques that were getting plastic free for Ramadan. And after that, at the end of the year, we were able to have an event that which Muntasir moderated, which was with City Circle, and we looked at green mosques and the work around green mosques. Obviously, Cambridge Mosque had opened and it was very much in the spotlight, but we wanted to look at how can mosques become more sustainable, what is the advice that is out there, and just for new mosques, but mosques that are, you know, already in existence, whether they're in terrace houses or standalone buildings, etc. But we also were able to re-engage with our partners like Friends of the Earth and IFES, that is a long-term member and partner of the MCB, and see what else is it that we can do together. What are the key areas that we want to look at? And this Ramadan, we had this huge plan to do plastic-free iftars with multiple mosques and promote them at big events, and look at how can we cut down on single-use plastic and how can we advise people to do this in their life and have all these campaign actions. But then the COVID pandemic came along and took over, and so we weren't able to progress in the way that we wanted. So we got together as a team and we thought, how can we keep this momentum going, which is how these virtual eco-iftars are born. And I have to thank the team very much for continuing to push on it, and week on week we've been having these amazing conversations, which never mind anybody else enjoying, I think we as a team enjoy very much, and we hope that we'll be able to take this momentum and this motivation and push it into stronger campaigning throughout the year, whether it's with our partners, Friends of the Earth or IFES or others, and see how we can build a larger coalition of Muslims, minority communities, and the community as a whole to do more around this issue. So that's me. That's enough from me. Shahab, feel free to take it back, and we'll go to our main guest, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Lamis. So as I mentioned earlier on, we've been joined by the Green Deen tribe. The Green Deen tribe is an initiative inspired by Ibrahim Abdul Martin's book, The Green Deen, What Islam Teaches About Protecting the Planet, which seeks to reconnect to the integral relationship of nature and the Islamic teaching of spirituality and tending to the earth. The idea that through deepening our understanding of the role of Khalifa and our connection to the earth, we deepen our love and relationship with Allah and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As Muslims, our relationship with the earth is an integral part of our belief in divine connection. Over the past few years, they've hosted film screenings, retreats, workshops, walks, and more with the intent of holding nature as a sacred space. I'm going to hand over to Jumana, who is a member of Green Deen tribe and has taken part in the organization of Ethical Iftars. Last year, she set up a Facebook campaign called Plastic Free Ramadan campaign for an end to single-use plastic during Ramadanian gathering. Just going to pass over to Sister Jumana and talk us more about it.
So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Ramadan Mubarak. And Shahab, do just help me with the time and let me know when that time is coming to an end. So, thank you, Jazakallah khairan. So, Green Deen Tribe is a really beautiful initiative that was set up really by Rabia Mali and her sister Sakina, with this intention of bringing a kind of grassroots action around environmentalism, and particularly amongst women. So, Green Deen Tribe is a women's tribe. And what's been really incredible about Green Deen Tribe is the way that women have come together, first of all through a series of retreats that were organized, bringing their different skills, their different experiences, and bringing that into a kind of collective. So going from a very ibadah kind of centered approach about spending a lot of time in nature, reflecting on the parts of the Quran that speak about the incredible relationship that we have as servants of Allah to nature, and the responsibility that we have to listen to nature, to learn from nature, to allow nature to inform us, as well as our responsibility as caring for nature. This idea of Khalifa is not one of control, but rather of respect. The Khalifa is the one who inherits that responsibility to care for nature and to preserve it. And I think what's really important as well is that everything that the Green Deen tribe do has this prophetic, is informed by prophetic sunnah. And I think that's really important. It's not something new that's happening. It's going back to the sunnah, back to the example of Rasulullah, and also the the traditions of people who have gone before us, and many of the traditions rooted in traditional Islamic cultures. So that's kind of my perspective on Green Deen. For me, it was a real kind of such a beautiful thing to come into, because I always felt so strongly that my faith was so connected to nature. And there's this mythology somehow that the Abrahamic faiths, and I don't know, maybe Islam in particular, don't have this connection with nature. And when sometimes I would talk about that with people, with people who weren't Muslim, they would be so surprised. Really? You have stories about how the waves are praising Allah, or you have stories about how the thunder rolling across the sky is singing Allah's name, and that the earth in Surah Al-Zilzal is crying out at her burdens, you know, and people would be so surprised, but actually this relationship with nature is just deeply, deeply embedded in Islam. And so for me, it was a beautiful kind of doorway and chapter in my life, and in other women that I've seen as well. For me, my bugbear, everyone who knows me knows I have this thing about plastic. And so last year, I set up a Facebook page called Plastic Free Ramadan. And we you know, the beautiful thing about the internet is the kind of contacts you can make around the world. And that's been really nice in just, I had help from other sisters in putting together information, memes that could be easily shared around easy ways of reducing plastic, substitutes, different approaches you can take. And I've been kind of collecting stories, you know, again, it's like grassroots stories from masjids and Islamic centers across the country who have, even if the people have resisted at first, they've said, look, there's no more plastic in the building, and people say, no, we can't manage, we can't do it. But they bring their own mugs, they bring their own spoons, they bring their own plates. And within a year, they've turned things around, and they've completely kind of managed to eradicate single-use plastic. And I think that's wonderful, because we have these gatherings of light where we read the Quran and we pray Taraweeh and we hear these beautiful talks. Your heart kind of swells with the nur of that during Ramadan. And then at the end of the evening, you see a bin bag full of plastic and you think, no, the two don't go together. So really that's been my big, in my personal tiny little part in Green Deen tribe, that's been my little area of passion. And Green Deen tribe as a whole, I can't honestly, if I could tell you the number of incredible women doing incredible things, bringing all their talents and all their skills to their communities across the country. It's a really beautiful thing, from Forest School in Liverpool to talks and cooking and working around film screening, workshops, allotment workshops, ethical swaps that you're going to hear about, just walks, herbalism, being in nature. I mean, the list is really, really rich. Yeah, I feel like I've probably talked quite a lot, Shahab, you know, but that's my kind of real whiz around Green Deen tribe and my experience of Green Deen tribe.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. You mentioned that you worked a lot with the Muslims to get them to get on board with reducing their plastic. That was something that we were going to do as well as part of our eco-masjid plan before the masjids got closed down. Hopefully when the situation changes, that's the plan is for us to get back into it. What advice do you have for us to get masjids to engage more around that? I feel like some of the bigger masjids, maybe they're a bit more on top of it to understand that we might need to be looking after the planet. There might be more pressure from some of the congregation. I feel like some of the smaller masjids that we have, either they don't have the resources or the know-how or the motivation to dig deep and figure out how to do this.
I suppose it's helping people with the alternatives, but and how they can practically manage it. It seems as well that I came across this lovely centre in Harrow, and they had managed to do this by, and they weren't providing, you know, expensive kind of disposable, you know, compostable reusables. They had said to people, you will bring a cup and a plate and a spoon, and people kicked back so hard at the beginning. But what really inspired me about this little masjid story was that in less than a year, everyone involved had just said, yeah, we get it now. And so it became habit. And it's about what can help, who and what can help change the habit. And I think that's the key thing. If there are people who are really, to actually, people will get used to it after probably not that long. And I think once they see that, once they hear the stories of success from other people, that can really help. Inshallah. Yeah.
Sorry, my son's come to join me, so you might
Good.
hear him a bit more now.
Hello.
Hello. We're just going to call in Sister Anisa as well. I understand, Anisa, you've been working with the Green Deen tribe around the ethical swap initiative of the tribe. Would you like to come and tell us a little bit more about that part of it?
Yeah, certainly. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much, Sister Jwana, for your description of the Green Deen tribe. As Sister mentioned, there are a few initiatives that are associated with the Green Deen tribe. Those are things such as the Eco-Iftar, looking towards more breaking a fast in a sustainable way. We also have the film club that shows films with a particular ethical focus or sustainable slant, with the intention of having more of a thoughts-led discussion around some of the issues that were raised through an Islamic lens. And we also have the ethical swap, which I'm more involved in. There are also a number of other wonderful initiatives that are undertaken by the Green Deen tribe, which you should be able to access and learn more about online on social media. However, for the ethical swap, I think for me, the whole reason behind getting involved is just the concept of ethical fashion and what that actually means and how that relates to Islam as a whole. I know that's quite a difficult thing to summarize in one sentence. However, you know, we hear a lot about ethical fashion at the moment. There's a big buzzword around conspicuous consumption, the supply chain, sustainability, and I guess it's an umbrella term, which is more around looking at the sourcing and production of clothing and associated materials in a sustainable way. And if you look at that in an Islamic context, it's certainly associated with how things in our religion are more intentions-led and how that informs the behaviours we undertake when we go out into wider society. And that is, for me, ethical fashion through an Islamic lens, is looking at clothing, i.e. the purchase of clothing and the production of clothing in a sustainable way, and is based around pure intentions. So whether that is the sourcing of materials or actually the production within the factories of clothes, and trying to take back an element of the supply chain that I feel has been lost within the production of clothing. And we see that more notably within, for instance, the 23 kilograms of sort of greenhouse gases that are used within the production of 1 kilo of fabric, for instance, every year. We see that with the trillions of water that's used by the fashion industry. We see that in the 70 million barrels of oil that are used in the production of polyester. So that informs the rationale behind ethical fashion as a movement at the moment. And it also sort of looks at wanting to inform our actions around the consumption of clothing within the society that's so much centred on conspicuous consumption, which leads us towards the intentions or the rationale behind the ethical swap as a collective, which I sort of got involved in around a year and a half ago. I would say It's an initiative that's around 2 years old. We've had around 3 swaps, mainly in the London area, and as Sister Jemana mentioned, it is predominantly women in the audience. However, we do want our messaging to spread more widely, and it's around talks which centre on our experiences in fashion. For me, from my sort of experience in economics and in history, I look at fashion and the production of clothing through a gendered lens, and I like to take our sisters that attend swaps through more of a journey around the production of clothing, say in the 1800s and 1900s, and how that compares to now, which actually compares quite a lot to now, rather tragically, where we have people sort of at the turn of the century during the Industrial Revolution who really suffered in the production of garments, and that is very similar to what's going on in the global south at the moment, unfortunately. So we have a lot of talks and informed discussion around the gendered aspect of clothing and production. We have discussions around sort of topical issues within specific elements of production across the world. We had a recent speaker talk about the clothing surplus and how the African continent is now used as a dumping ground essentially for clothing surplus. And in turn, we look at that and the impact it has on the environment, as I've mentioned earlier, with the intention around informing our actions around how we purchase clothing. And we culminate the day or the session with a swap itself, where we encourage participants to say bring in up to 5 items of clothing to a swap, and then pick up essentially 5 new items that other participants have brought in. And through that way we get to think about the gift for a gift concept. Although you are essentially giving something that's old, you are getting essentially you're getting something secondhand back. But it's the idea that you are gifting a concept, because you are controlling the supply chain in that way. For every element of clothing that you recycle, that you upcycle, that you give away, that you swap with someone, that you thrift, you are stopping the production of clothing, and driving that into the market in terms of increased supply, and that depressing prices and then increasing demand and then perpetuating that cycle further. So having more conversations around swapping and the importance of repurposing clothing as it stands, we get to sort of think about how our actions have an impact on society. And if we draw that as a parallel with our own religion, we are very much a religion of moderation, not living in excess, being conscious of our surroundings, treating things with caution, in turn for that to produce a sense of kindness in society. And as our Prophet once said, he who does not thank people does not thank Allah. And that's true, because the more we put garments closer to ourselves and our skin that are produced by the tears of a factory worker, we aren't really thanking the people that have produced these garments, are we? We're sort of unknowingly causing actions to happen that we are so far removed from here in the West, for example, or in more of a developed society. So that is probably a high-level overview, I guess, of ethical fashion and how that relates to our religion, and also what has propelled my motivations for being involved in the swap itself and how we conduct swaps. And we also like to advertise the fact that we don't promote a clothing surplus. We do have, thankfully, a nice footfall at our events, where we have a lot of women coming. Some of them donate more than 5 items. We do recommend 5, and sometimes there aren't a lot of attendees there that are able to take up to 5. In London there's very small rooms, storage is an issue. So we always try and donate clothing surplus from each swap to a local charity. So that is something that's very important to us. There's an element of charity there alongside thrifting and repurposing, which we preach, I guess, within the context of the event itself.
Well, thank you very much for your words on it. But just like you mentioned, like in the 70s and early years, we were a lot more, I think we were a lot more conscious, maybe not conscious, but unconsciously we were better at reusing things before than we do now. We're more likely to buy things, throw things away, buy more things. But it's time that we try to go back to some of that stuff and start reusing it. And it's kind of linking both of your topics together. And it's how can we as a society and Muslims be more conscious of sustainability, not in just one aspect and not in just reducing plastic or reducing waste. And it's about reducing water and reducing everything that we consume. And once you've reduced it, you should also share. And in Islam, I'm going to be really bad I'm really bad quoting hadiths, but there is a hadith about giving away something that you've been given, a present that you've been given. It's okay to give it away to somebody else to reuse. And that's one of the traditions from the past that have kind of got lost. So it's good that we can try and encourage that more, and it'd be really nice to see how we can kind of bring those things into our community centers, which are our masjids. And I guess iftar and ethical and eco-iftars are a really good way to begin those conversations, and because everybody is very focused on their deen and wanting to do better. So it's really nice. It would be really nice to see how those things can come together. But I am talking a lot, and I would like to kind of open it up, and send it back to you, but also open it up to the people. I think there's a lot of comments, questions coming in.
I very much agree with what you've said. I was actually thinking about this piece earlier, and I thought of the concept of sadaqah, and for those sort of non-Muslims that may be listening, I'd say it's a form of charity. And there is that idea where if you really love an item, you know, there's more barakah, or there's more sort of more reward attached to giving something away that you really like. And I think, unfortunately, in our society, which you've mentioned, is one that's so focused on conspicuous consumption and the material good, that giving away material items or thinking about them in a different way is essentially, you know, a form of charity. And it's a small place that one can start, that doesn't have, say, you know, you have to donate X amount for this cause. It's just a household thing that's manageable, and it's something that's scalable. You know, as I've mentioned, with Islam being a religion that prides itself on not going beyond your means and looking at a more conservative approach in terms of a lifestyle more generally, and something like clothing and the attitude that you've mentioned around wanting to always buy something new to remain relevant, it's something that is linked, so therefore it can be manageable, you know, to give something away, even with the expectation of getting it back as well, not with just even going away from the concept of the swap, i.e. I give something and you give me it back. It's more of a case of you can even give some, you know, clothing to someone in need to essentially stop them from buying something that's sort of lower priced, which that price point actually reflects the poor quality of production of that garment. You know, you're actually stopping that transaction from happening. You're stopping that exchange from happening in that act of sadaqah or charity. So you can even look at it that way as well, if you weren't quite comfortable with the idea of swapping clothes, because I understand, you know, in our society, in some cultures, there is a taboo around second-hand clothing and perhaps buying something from a charity shop. So, you know, if you looked at it in more basic terms as well, you could also argue that could be the case.
I have a lot of questions but I'm going to keep those to myself for now
I think
and open it to the audience.
But maybe Sham?
Yeah. Yep. Would somebody, I think Saba, you've asked a couple of questions in the comments. Would you like to ask some of them?
Saba, are you willing?
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Sorry, no, I don't think I had a question. I had lots of comments. I agree with everything that Nisa was saying. And I think it's also perhaps, certainly from my culture, something that we didn't like, jumble sales. We didn't like secondhand clothes. You know, a trend always of having new clothes, certainly for Eid and things like that. So trying to encourage reduced consumption, I think particularly in the pandemic, has been good because we're not buying clothes because no one's seeing what we're wearing. And also accepting our clothes, what we've got, wearing them, you know, more rather than give them to charity or you know, discarding them. So I think everything is changing because of this pandemic, and there are some good things, and hopefully we're appreciating our clothes a bit more and not going in for must-haves and sales and being attracted by all the commercialism of buying.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that, and it's something I've been thinking about in the run up to Eid as we're in the sort of last third of Ramadan. Is there's such a tradition around Eid and adorning yourself or buying something new in order to celebrate, and how the dynamic has changed in times of lockdown where people are, you know, at home and they're in a position where they need to look at their finances more as a result of their employment during lockdown. And it's interesting as to whether we'll carry this rhetoric forward around always wanting to wear something new for Eid. And I think whilst we cannot do things like physically undertake a swap or gift someone a piece of clothing who might be in need in the run up to Eid, what we can do is try and, as you've said, change our mindset, and just so, you know, when the doors open and lockdown measures are eased, we are ready with our bags of clothing, for instance, we may want to donate, or with our mindset that we're not sort of tempted, I guess, when we do see floods of sales go through on the high street, to sort of succumb to that if we've developed more of a stance on it during lockdown.
We've got another question from Salma. Salma, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. But just before I do, is it okay if I just come back on what Anisa just said about Eid and clothes? So I grew up in the 70s. I was one of 8 siblings, and we grew up in relative poverty. There were 10 of us, you know, 8 children and mum and dad in a 2-bedroom property, and we did grow up poor. So we have grown up with this idea of hand-me-downs. So we all basically wore each other's clothes, which was absolutely fine. Now, alhamdulillah, you know, we've moved out of that stage in our lives. We're all grown up. We have our own homes, alhamdulillah. We are earning. And I do think that we need to be mindful as well as a community that there are families still out there who are struggling, and perhaps Eid is their only opportunity for them to buy something new for their children and for themselves, or as gifts. So I don't think we should be too hard on ourselves when it comes to a celebration, because, you know, in our faith we're not stopped from buying, but like we've all said before, everything in moderation. Our Prophet, peace be upon him, was everything in moderation. So I think that, for me personally, I think it's fine if you want to buy yourself something for Eid. It is our festival, it is our special occasion, and if you want to, and I love the idea of the little on the comments, the swaps and the hijab swaps and the outfit swaps, and definitely, you know, giving a gift with clothing, if you know that somebody is struggling, is absolutely a wonderful thought. But my question was, I just wanted to kind of make that point. So I know how somebody can feel not having anything special on Eid, and I think just to be mindful of that. My question was, I think, was more of something that has been festering in my mind for many months now, even before lockdown, is this whole notion that our masjids should be our community centres where we learn not just about our faith but also about how to be active members of our community. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, their masjids were the hub of the community. People went there to learn, they went there to pray, they also went there to as a social place to meet. So my question is that I know some people have mentioned it above about the where's it gone? I just read somebody say about the committees or whoever organises the masjids. But I do think as well that we have a lot of the masjids in our various cities where we live. They have the children work, the children classes, the madrasas. And I'm just interested to find out how many of those madrasas are actually putting this on their agenda as well. It's important, obviously, for our children to learn Quran and to learn how to pray and to learn about the history of their faith. That's absolutely important. But I do think that this whole agenda, the green aspect of our beautiful Deen should also be taught to our children. Now, we should be doing it in our homes anyway. As I mentioned before, we should be leading by example. But then we should also place some responsibility on our masjids and our madrasas that are supposedly teaching our children. Youth groups, I'm part of a wonderful youth group that before lockdown was meeting every Friday, and we have a large number of children who attend, and then there have been aspects of those circles where we have introduced the whole environment side, the climate, especially about how the Quran celebrates the earth and all the creations. So I think it's an important move forward, I think, to make sure that we are teaching the youth and re-educating ourselves, because I think, I can only speak for myself, to move away from what I was brought up to, the way I was brought up. Not necessarily in a bad way, but just to remind myself is really important, to know how I was brought up, to know that obviously times are different now. Everything pretty much does, unfortunately, come pre-packaged, and it's making the right choices. Our faith is all about making the right choices as well. So that is what I just wanted to kind of put in there about using our masjids, our madrasas, our own homes as a way of educating ourselves and our children.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I also wanted to go back to your point around Eid and clothing. Firstly, I really do agree with your point, because growing up as well, it was a nice thing to look forward to, buying something new and things like that. But I think it just really does depend on the personal situation, and I think, if your intention behind your action is fundamentally pure, and if you're of that position where you're not living in excess every day, then it circles back to our point around moderation, doesn't it? And the purchase, for example, is fine in moderation, because you will be able to give it that lifespan through hand-me-downs, etc., or through upcycling it. So I do agree with that, and I think to also further agree in the fact that with ethical swap, even ethical clothing or sustainability, there's a big dark side to it, and getting involved something like this, or even speaking like this, even with, I guess, Sister Jemana would probably say with single-use plastic as well, where it's now a profanity to even discuss these things because people have such a big view on it, and it can get quite heated, and you can walk away feeling quite guilty even if you've unknowingly partaken in that. So I think the important thing is to, I guess, politely relay the message and step away from the line where you're sort of kind of, I guess, violently trying to enforce it as the definitive answer. I think that's very important, because we're very lucky in this day and age whereby there's a lot of information out there, and we can educate ourselves and have more of an informed opinion. And that really does link to my point, and your next point actually, about the role of the mosque and the madrasa in educating our next generation of Muslims. And I do agree with that. There has to be more of an element around teaching the practicalities of Islam. And I think that becomes harder as we move further away from the East into the West, whereby we have a language barrier, and a lot of our teaching is around learning Quranic Arabic and focusing on recitation, learning to pray, and understanding why we're praying and what is in our prayers. And I think, from my experience anyway, from going to mosques in Glasgow growing up, which from my travels living around the UK, everyone's experience of Islam is different in different cities. I feel like some Muslims are more observant than others the further down south you go. But for me anyway, in my education in household mosques rather than mainstream mosques is more around Quranic recitation and the focus on finishing the Quran the first time, the second time making dua, learning the fundamentals around the Quran itself. And I would say, as I've become an adult and as I've gone into different spaces, sort of moving around different cities, and now ending up in London, that people are having more adult conversations around the practical side of living the Islamic life and living with this religion as a lifestyle rather than an instruction. And I think that's very important, that we do educate ourselves to percolate that downwards to the next generation. But I do agree that just so much as learning the Quran and recitation is important, in parallel with that, mosques should also be teaching, or giving guidance on the Muslim lifestyle, because that helps, I guess, discontinue or abolish the disconnect between how Muslims live now and then, how Muslims are meant to live by the spirit and letter of our law, that we've set for ourselves based on our intention of the Quran. And that should help dispel a lot of myths and perceptions there are about our religion, as we all know, the elephant in the room within the media, for instance. So I guess, we have to normalize teaching the tenets of our faith and how we live it in line with the Islamic teachings by our book. And I really do agree with that. But I think mosques are quite challenged at the moment because there are so many conflicting directions that they have to go in nowadays in this day and age. And they're forced to take a stance on things they may not have had to have taken a stance on before. But I do feel that mosques, would benefit from our insight in terms of wanting to educate the next generation of Muslims. And that's not even looking at it through a gendered lens as well, because we know that the place of the woman in the mosque in Britain has evolved, quite a lot, and it's still on that path of evolution. So, all we can do is say with intention and just hope for that to materialize as the months and years go by.
At this point, I'd just like to call Jumana back into the conversation. I see a lot of questions and a lot of conversations
Yes, there are a lot.
In the chat, and give you some time to talk and give your point on those.
So lots of questions about how it can seem relevant to kind of be working at reducing our plastic consumption. And I think what I really notice is when we talk with children about the importance of the environment, they have this very natural, very easy love for the environment, where it just it really makes sense not to have all this plastic waste that takes hundreds of years, maybe thousands, to ever break down. So I think there's something about just for me, when you love something, when you feel motivated, it's easier to put that work and that striving in for it. So yeah, I think for me, and also what I've really seen Rabia and Sakina do from the Green Deen tribe is a lot of work about finding ways for people to be in nature and experience all that nature has to give them. And I think that's a really important part of it, because just being quite cut off from the purpose of why and what it's going to mean to reduce your plastic consumption, or to do the washing up rather than have disposable plastics. And I've suffered from years of massive washing up after iftar, so I know that one very well. But when you feel like that there is this real, that what you're doing is ibadah, it's not just a pointless task, it's a true ibadah. To care for the environment is to worship Allah more and more deeply. Then you can feel, actually it's okay, then I'll carry my cup. Mm-hmm. And we won't have the styrofoam and the plastic, and we'll look at these more traditional methods where people live closer to their fitrah, and they share from a plate, or you eat with your hand, or you have a teacup made from clay. All these lovely things that actually are so sustainable, so natural, and are really part of a lifestyle that is focused on taqwa and on pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
You just stopped at just the right time for us to kind of start talking about. Just almost iftar time over here, and I think they're gonna iftar in just about a minute.
So it's iftar time here now. I'm just going to play the adhan for us all, and then please feel free to open your fast. We will conclude after adhan, inshallah. Thanks so much. May Allah accept all of our fasts, and may Allah reward us whether we are fasting or not, inshallah. I don't know if Shahab is still around or whether he's busy opening his fast.
He's busy looking after his children.
I am still around, don't worry. I'm just trying to keep my son calm. He's seen a lot of food around, so he wants to check everything out.
I would be just as excited by the food, to be fair.
I know. I'm just waiting for to finish to eat it. Thank you. Jazakallah khair for everybody for coming and attending. It was really good listening to you guys speak and telling us more about how we can be better in Ramadan and inshallah outside Ramadan as well. The learnings that we get from Ramadan, it is for us to use outside as well. And yeah, Jazakallah khair for you guys. Is there any closing words you would like to say?
Jamal and Isa, anything from you before we close?
No, nothing from me. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for dialing in, and thank you for your thoughtful feedback and questions. And hopefully you found it all accessible, and hopefully not as dark as I'd mentioned earlier.
And yeah, thank you for having us, Jazakumullah khair, and that, you know, I think we just really look forward to more collaborations and more discussions and more ethical iftars and discussions about how we can fulfill this really important role, this manner that Allah has given us, and yeah, enjoy the unfolding spring.
I just want to thank you all as well. I really want to thank the ladies from Green Deen, because I know you were pulled in a little bit last minute because Rabia unfortunately wasn't able to attend, and she did send her apologies and her salam, and I've been having some amazing conversations with her in the background as well. So I really enjoyed working with you guys to bring you here, and I know you've been doing some great stuff on Instagram. I've been enjoying and sharing your output, so I hope that we can work together a lot more moving forwards. And I think this series of iftars has been a really good chance for us to connect with so many different people in the movement, whether they've been able to attend or not. And there's clearly so much work happening by amazing Muslims across the board in this area, whether it be ethical fashion or, you know, eco living or growing your own food or beekeeping or saving water or greening up our mosques. There's amazing projects happening. It's more a question of bringing all of that work together so that we can learn from each other. And these iftars were an initial way of doing that. And I actually think, you know, subhanAllah, I'm sure Muntasir and the team, Shahab and the team will agree, we've learned and heard so much more about so many more projects during this time than we actually thought we would even. So we thank everybody who's been able to attend, and we really, really appreciate the conversation, and we will be keeping that going. We're hoping that we can sort of use the sustainability page on our website to become a little bit of a hub so that people can come there and learn about other projects. You know, the MCB, as I said, is there to be an umbrella. We're there to support our members and to support the community really, and act as that hub of information. So we do hope that you will email us, that you will contact us via the website, that you will contact us via social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You know, follow us, follow Green Deen Tribe. We want to keep the conversation going. We want to make sure that we all feel supported. We can sometimes feel isolated in this conversation, never mind in the COVID world. So it's good to keep connected, keep those vibes going, keep our motivation going. Because as we have said, you know, sometimes these campaigns lose momentum, not just in our mosque, but in our own lives. And we are there to try and keep that momentum going, inshallah. So I really want to thank our partners, IFES and Friends of the Earth as well, for helping us push forward this series, and for helping us in the plastics campaign that we were meant to be doing, and hopefully we'll be able to continue. And hopefully we can drag Green Deen into that as well, given, you know, the work that Jumana has been doing, and learn from some of the stuff that you have. But also thank you really to the volunteer team, Muntasir, Bernardo, Manuel, Shahab, Hanan. Really appreciate the work that you've put in, and the work that you've been doing in the background, trying to create stuff for the website, and we will slowly start putting that out again. And thank you to the MCB exec and staff that have supported as well. This has been such a great conversation. I cannot appreciate it enough. And I think looking at this template, we may continue these afterwards, and maybe less frequent, maybe a different format. But I think it just helps us all keep that conversation, that motivation, right, and stay inspired. So again, thank you so much, everyone. And have a wonderful last 10 nights. May Allah bless you with all of the rewards in these last 10 nights. Pray for us. We will pray for you. And please, my last pitch would be, you know, the MCB cannot continue to do all of the amazing work it does without the support of its members and its community. So please do donate to us. I shared our Launch Good page. I've shared our donate. We're doing the My 10 Nights campaign in the last 10 nights. Even if it's £1 or 1 penny, we're totally fine with that. I don't think it allows you to donate 1 penny, but your zakat or your sadaqah. And on Sunday, we will be doing this £1 24-hour Launch Good competition. So if you would like to support us during that 24-hour period, we would really appreciate that as well, because if we win either with the most number of supporters or the most amount raised in 24 hours, we get an extra $5,000 from Launch Good, without anything from us and anything from you. So thank you so much, and I really hope you keep a lookout on all of our channels, and may Allah bless you during this time. Jazakallah khair.